The night the lifeline almost snapped. April 4th, 1943. 2:17 hours. Mid-Atlantic Gap. The Black Pit. The sea is a churning void of ink and moonlight. Waves slam against the steel hull of the British merchant ship SS North Lion, its engines straining as it pushes through the most dangerous waters on Earth. There is no land for hundreds of miles, no air cover, no hope of rescue, just darkness, and the dreadful knowledge that something is out there. Lookouts on the bridge grip their binoculars, the freezing wind slicing across their faces. You can hear it, the steady thump of the ship's engines, echoing over the waves like a heartbeat. Somewhere beneath that rhythm, something else lurks, something patient, something hunting. At 2:18, a young seaman spots it, a thin, white streak gliding across the surface, awake, fast, precise, coming straight toward them. Before he can shout a warning, the torpedo hits. A violent blast tears open the ship's starboard side. Men are thrown to the deck. The lights flicker, then die. Smoke fills the corridors. As the ship lists, the crew scrambles to abandon ship, their lifeboats tossed into the frigid blackness of the North Atlantic, and somewhere in that darkness, a shadow rises. The periscope of U-223, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Hans Joachim Hesse, cuts through the waves. He watches the ship burn, calmly giving orders as if he's conducting a grim mechanical ritual. Another target down. Another link severed from Britain's fragile supply chain. At 2:29, more explosions erupt across the convoy. Convoy SC-107, 42 merchant ships carrying grain, fuel, and military supplies, is being torn apart. 2 more freighters vanish beneath the waves, swallowed in fire. Panic ripples through the escort ships. They are outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely surrounded. Because tonight is not an accident. Tonight is a trap. 10 German U-boats, Type 7 and Type 9 killers, have converged on the convoy, striking with a precision so terrifying that Admiralty analysts back in London will later struggle to believe it was possible. But it was. And this night was only one of hundreds. By the spring of 1943, Admiral Karl Dönitz has turned the Atlantic into a slaughterhouse. His wolfpacks roam the sea lanes at will. They hunt in coordinated groups, communicating through encrypted Enigma messages. They strike at night on the surface, engines roaring, gunners ready, fast enough to outrun British escorts and invisible to their outdated radar. And the worst part? Britain's food reserves are running out. Weeks left, not months, weeks. Inside the Admiralty War Room beneath London, the fear is unspoken, but everywhere, the Empire is fed almost entirely by sea. Grain from Canada, fuel from America, meat, butter, sugar, iron, timber, everything crosses the Atlantic. Now, the Atlantic is dying, and the U-boats are winning, because the tiny submarines the Royal Navy once mocked as toys have become the greatest threat Britain has faced since Napoleon commanders like Otto Kretschmer, the silent hunter, attack convoys at point-blank range, slipping between escort ships as if daring them to fire. In these pitch-black waters, he is a ghost, and every ship he sinks tightens the noose around Britain's neck. The Navy knows this. Churchill knows this. And deep down, the men at sea feel it with every crossing. But the worst realization is still coming, because the British are about to learn that the U-boats have a hidden advantage, one that makes the Wolfpacks far deadlier than anyone in London imagines, something that keeps them at sea for months, something Britain hasn't even discovered yet, and when they do, it will change everything. The hunters in the dark, the wrecks of convoy, C-107 still smolder on the surface when dawn breaks, but for the men of the Royal Navy, there is no time to mourn. Reports flood into the Admiralty. More ships sunk in the Black Pit, more convoys scattered in the night, more survivors drifting in lifeboats, if they survive at all. Yet even as Britain reels from the losses, the real danger remains invisible, hidden beneath the gray Atlantic swells. Because the U-boats are not simply attacking, they are evolving. The young wolves. Deep inside U-99, Kapitan Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer adjusts his headphones, listening to the faint hum of merchant screws through the hydrophone. He is just 29 years old, calm, methodical, terrifyingly precise. His crew calls him Silent Otto. The Allies call him something else, the most lethal submarine commander of the war. He doesn't waste torpedoes. He doesn't fear escort ships. He waits until the darkest hour, rises to the surface, and attacks from inside the convoy itself, slipping between cargo vessels like a shark slicing through a school of fish. You can almost imagine the sound on that freezing night. The hiss of the ballast tanks, the cold slap of seawater on the hull, the sudden monstrous burst of the deck gun firing at point-blank range. This is not random chaos. This is a new kind of warfare. Wolfpack warfare. To the men on the merchant decks, a U-boat attack feels like fate. Silent, sudden, unstoppable. But in reality, every strike is part of a carefully orchestrated system created by Admiral Karl Dönitz, the mastermind of the U-boat arm. He trains his captains to operate like wolves. One boat spots a convoy and stalks it for hours, sometimes days, sending coded Enigma signals back to BDU headquarters. Dönitz then directs surrounding submarines to converge. By the time the convoy escorts notice anything, it is already too late. The wolves are gathered, weapons armed, engines roaring on the surface, and every night the same nightmare repeats, searchlights sweeping the waves. Depth-charge detonations shaking the sea, men screaming in the dark, another hole torn in Britain's lifeline. Yet the Admiralty still believes this is a matter of numbers. Too many U-boats, not enough escorts. If they can just keep replacing the ships, the problem will eventually stabilize. But they're wrong. Desperately wrong. There is something deeper happening beneath the surface. A secret that explains why the Wolfpacks never seem to thin out. Why they can wait for days, strike, disappear, and reappear hundreds of miles away as if refueled by the ocean itself. Because they are being refueled. And the British don't know it yet. The Black Pit deepens. By the winter of 1942, the U-boats have perfected their craft. They know the convoy routes. They know the Royal Navy's weaknesses. And worst of all, they know where the escorts cannot go. The vast central region of the Atlantic where Allied aircraft cannot reach this area earns a name whispered with dread. The Mid-Atlantic Gap. The Black Pit. The U-boats own it. Here the sea feels different, almost predatory. The crews can sense it. Every wave might hide a periscope. Every shadow on the horizon might be a deck gun rising from the depths. But even as the losses mount, even as Britain's food reserves fall dangerously low, the Admiralty still does not understand the full scale of the threat. Convoys are dying, supply lines are shrinking, and yet somehow the U-boats never run out of fuel, never run out of torpedoes, never disappear. The puzzle pieces are scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. Soon, one discovery will connect them. And when it does, everything the British thought they knew about U-boat operations will be shattered. The Hunger War begins. Britain entered the war with one great weakness. It was an island that could not feed itself. By 1939, nearly 70% of British food came from overseas wheat from Canada, meat from Argentina, butter and cheese from New Zealand, oil and war materials from the United States. And Hitler knew it. To him, starving Britain into submission was far easier, and far deadlier, than invading its shores. So in the winter of 1940, Germany launched what the Admiralty feared most, a silent, invisible war beneath the waves, a war for food, fuel, and survival. Convoys loaded with grain and supplies became floating targets. One torpedo, and millions of meals vanished into the sea. U-boat captains called them floating larders. They stalked the North Atlantic with growing confidence. Night attacks, wolfpacks, shadowing convoys for days before ripping them apart. A single U-boat could sink 50,000 tons of food and supplies on a good patrol. and Britain felt the choke. Rations shrank. Bread slices got thinner. Milk was watered down. Children were told to eat less sugar because the ships carrying it were lying at the bottom of the ocean. Newspapers whispered a chilling phrase: Britain is only 6 weeks from starvation. And in Hitler's war room, the message was clear. If the U-boats could cut Britain's lifeline, the island would fall without a single German soldier setting foot on it. But Britain wasn't ready to surrender its people or its seas, because what came next would change the entire course of the Battle of the Atlantic. The Wolfpacks close in. By 1941, the U-boat threat evolved into something far more terrifying than lone submarines hunting in silence. They became Wolfpacks. Instead of attacking individually, U-boats now worked together in coordinated swarms. One submarine spotted a convoy, another shadowed it. And soon 10, 15, even 20 U-boats gathered like predators, circling wounded prey. When the attack finally came, it unfolded with brutal precision. Night. No moon. No warning. Long lines of merchant ships steamed forward in blacked-out silence, thinking they were safe in numbers. Then, chaos. Torpedoes slammed into hulls. Engines exploded into fireballs. Men scrambled over burning oil slicks as entire ships vanished beneath them. The sea glowed with flames. German Admiral Karl Donitz, mastermind of the Wolfpacks, boasted that his U-boats were winning the war for Germany. And for a moment, it seemed true. Convoys HX-79 and SC-7 were devastated. In just a few nights, over 30 ships were sunk. Escorts were overwhelmed, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Shipping losses skyrocketed to nearly 700,000 tons a month, the highest in the war so far. The Atlantic was turning into a graveyard of steel. Britain's food stocks dropped. Supplies dwindled. The nation's morale cracked under the strain. For the first time, the British people felt something that frightened them more than air raids: the fear of hunger. And in Berlin, Hitler believed his strategy was working. He was convinced the U-boats would deliver the knockout blow. But he didn't know that Britain, backed by a new ally across the ocean, was preparing to unleash technologies and tactics the U-boat commanders had never faced before. The turning point was coming. The tide turns. The secret weapons that saved Britain. Just when Britain seemed weeks away from collapse, the Allies unveiled a series of breakthroughs that shifted the balance of the Battle of the Atlantic almost overnight. The first came from a quiet team of scientists and engineers working in absolute secrecy. In a hidden laboratory beneath the University of Birmingham, physicist Sir Henry Tizard and engineer John Randall perfected a device no larger than a soup bowl, but powerful enough to change the war: the cavity magnetron. This tiny invention produced high-frequency microwaves that made a new kind of radar possible: airborne radar, sharp enough to detect a U-boat's conning tower in the blackest night. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted. Coastal Command aircraft, the once mocked poor cousins of the RAF, now carried this revolutionary radar. Their patrols grew deadlier with every passing week. But radar alone wasn't enough. The U-boats dived at the first sight of aircraft, so the Allies unveiled another secret: Lee lights, massive blinding spotlights mounted under aircraft. A U-boat captain surfacing to recharge his batteries at night suddenly found the ocean around him exploding in white light, followed by depth charges raining from the sky. Then came the American contribution. With the United States now in the war, massive shipyards from Boston to Seattle began launching Liberty ships faster than Germany could sink them, one every 4 days at peak production. For every merchant ship sent to the bottom, 2 replacements arrived. Convoy escorts multiplied too. New destroyer escorts, fast corvettes, long-range aircraft, all closing the deadly mid-Atlantic gap, the stretch of ocean where U-boats once operated with impunity. Meanwhile, Allied code breakers at Bletchley Park, led by Alan Turing, cracked new versions of the Enigma cipher. Suddenly, British commanders could predict Wolfpack positions and reroute convoys out of danger. The war was still brutal. Men still died in the icy black water. But by mid-1943, one thing was clear. The U-boats were no longer winning. For the first time, Admiral Dönitz admitted what had been unthinkable just months earlier. "We are losing the Battle of the Atlantic." The hunters who once prowled the ocean with arrogance were now being destroyed faster than Germany could replace them, and Britain, starving, desperate, and on the edge of collapse, could finally breathe again. The lifeline was open. The nation would survive. The aftermath and how close Britain truly came to collapse. When the tide finally turned in 1943, the world saw the Battle of the Atlantic as a hard-fought victory. But few truly understood how close Britain had come to disappearing from the war entirely. Behind closed doors in Whitehall, the reports were brutal. By early 1943, British grain reserves were down to 6 weeks. 6 weeks until bakeries closed, 6 weeks until ration books became worthless. 6 weeks until factories, shipyards, and the entire military machine ran out of the calories needed to function. Churchill later admitted in private notes that the U-boats worried him more than any other form of enemy attack. And he was right. Had convoys like ONS-5 or SC-118 been wiped out, had a single month of shipping losses remained unsustainable, the British Isles would have starved not metaphorically, literally. But because of radar, code-breaking, new ships, air cover, and relentless escort commanders like Captain Frederick John Walker, the noose began to loosen. Convoys grew bolder. Merchant sailors, the men who had lived for years with the fear of dying in 60 seconds, started to believe they might actually see home again. By late 1943, the statistics told the story. U-boat sinkings skyrocketed. Convoy losses plummeted. The mid-Atlantic became a killing ground for the Germans. The Wolfpacks that once brought Britain to its knees were now dissolving, shattered by technology, vigilance, and sheer Allied production. Yet for all the triumph, there was a darker truth, a truth whispered by survivors who had stared into the black waves and felt the ocean swallow their friends. Victory had come by inches, a few more months of German success, a few more convoys lost, a delay in radar, a failure at Bletchley Park, and Britain, the island fortress that refused to surrender, might have starved before D-Day was even a plan on paper. The world would have looked very different. But it didn't. Because convoys held, because engineers refused to give up, because code breakers worked themselves sick, because sailors fought from frozen decks in the middle of nowhere. The lifeline stayed open. Britain lived, and the U-boats, once seen as a crude joke by many British officers, became a symbol of how dangerous underestimation can be in war. The Battle of the Atlantic was won not by luck, but by relentless innovation, sacrifice, and a desperate race against time that the Allies could not afford to lose. This was the war beneath the waves, the war that nearly starved an empire and ultimately saved it. Britain survived the Battle of the Atlantic, but only barely. For years, the ocean that once protected the island nearly became its grave. The convoys, the escorts, the code breakers, the air crews, together, they held the line long enough for the tide to turn. And because of them, an entire nation stayed alive. If you found this story as incredible as the men who lived it, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these forgotten battles. And if you want more high-impact cinematic World War II stories just like this one, subscribe and join me as we uncover the moments where history almost changed forever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.